Hello. electronically on this laptop.
Yeah, oh, no, that's perfect. Yeah,
Sufficient.
yep.
We have a couple laptops set up with that packet.
Oh, great.
That's okay.
That is perfect.
Do have a public comment item too.
Oh, we do? Okay.
If I can, don't mind, I'll just put that out for the rest of the. Oh, yeah, brilliant. During the hearing, when we pulled the labels, they're straight off of the. It may come up and we give a comment. You want read aloud, we can read it aloud to.
Yeah, if they're here, I mean,
It's good, how are you?
I think, yeah, I think I had your information is good at ending in 2020. And that will to be made a bit later. Did I have these for you?
That's exciting.
I didn't think so, I didn't think so. And we can do it officially, or we can just sign either way.
Do you have a preference or do you have?
No. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Remember it all.
I don't know if we.
Okay.
I don't know if. Oh. Said I don't know.
Well, I've got everything in the back, so.
Right.
I'm noticing your microphone is on. And then the copy of that. And then I think it's gonna go. When we. So can you,
I have an extra pen.
I have this one, or what, we have?
Get that.
You need a water, you need a water? Get them.
What's that?
And then. Boy, does anybody else want a water?
I'm okay, thanks.
We'll get started in just a second, folks. Because of the notice, we gotta wait till 5:30. So give me just a second. Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready whenever you're ready.
Okay.
There's an on-air button. The other thing.
I need
Yeah, got
this here. And red means, okay, got it. All right, everybody ready? Good evening, everybody. I'll call to order this meeting. All right, there we go. I was having trouble with the microphone, sorry. I'll call to order this meeting of the Village of Germantown Board of Zoning Appeals. If our clerk would call the roll, please. Let me read the notice first. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with section 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that it will apprise the general public and news media of the subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Chairman White,
Here.
Member Hanson,
Here.
Member Edwards,
Here.
Member Knopp.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from our September 14, 2022 meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes? All right, fair enough. Other than Mr. Hanson, does anyone have any changes or corrections to the minutes?
No changes.
All right. In that case, anyone have a motion?
I have a motion to accept.
All right.
Second.
All right. The motion having been made and seconded to approve the minutes as submitted, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Mr. Hanson abstaining. The minutes are approved. All right. Our first order of business is, or next order of business is public hearing, deliberation, and action. The purpose of this hearing will be to hear any and all parties, their attorneys or agents, for or against a variance appeal filed by Rebecca Kirst from Allen Builders LLC, agent for Maxwell and Dawn Rivera, property owners, who is requesting a variance from the village's zoning code, section 17, to reduce the front street yard building setback from 112 feet to 58.3 feet for the property located at W129 and 11638 Hazel Heights, that's lot 5 of the Harvest Hills subdivision. Before we begin, I do have a procedural matter that I want to address. We received a email from Doug and Amy Nash. Are Mr. and Mrs. Nash here by any chance? All right, great. Let me read the email and then we can address it. The email says, "Hello, we were just informed by a neighbor that there is a Board of Zoning hearing next Wednesday, November 9th. This email is dated Friday, November 4 at 8:50 a.m. There is a hearing next Wednesday, November 9th on W129 and 11638 Hazel Heights, Lot 5 of the Harvest Hills subdivision. This is the lot next door to ours, and since this is the first we are hearing of this request, we need additional time to evaluate the proposed changes to the variance, any potential impacts to the property neighborhood, and consult with the Harvest Hills Homeowners Association. We would also like to talk the builders and/or property owners to better understand their intentions. Typically, the village would put a green sign up indicating a future public hearing or provide formal notice to the neighbors. We are unaware that either have happened. Thanks, Doug and Amy Nash, and then it has their address, which is Lot 6 of the Harvest Hills subdivision. So it is my understanding and belief, Mr. and Mrs. Nash, that notice was published in accordance with both the village zoning or the village code, section 17.53, and also in accordance with section 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes. And so as a result, because notice was properly given for this hearing, we need to proceed with the hearing unless both parties are willing to agree to postpone it to give you the time that you have requested. And so I'll ask both the applicant first, and then we'll ask the village if they're willing to agree to postpone the hearing, and then we'll have to republish notice at some additional time, giving you time. Now, if they don't agree, then it is my intention to proceed with the hearing today, and you will have an opportunity to speak. There is a public comment section portion of the hearing, and I'm certainly happy. We want to hear what you have to say. But so I will begin by asking, is Ms. Kirst here? No? All right. Can you say your name again? Dave? Can you spell it? Ah, all right. So, Mr. Vorbagel, you heard the request for additional time so that the neighbor can evaluate whether they have an objection. And as I said, the notice has been properly published. So without your agreement to postpone the hearing, then we're going to proceed with the hearing. Okay. In that case, I don't even need to get to the village because we're going to proceed with the hearing, given that it has been noticed properly. Mr. and Mrs. Nash, you will have an opportunity to speak. All right, so let's get started. Mr. Vorpagel, you may have done a bunch of these if you're an agent for the builder. I will tell you what I tell everybody at these things, that it's your hearing, so you're entitled to go first. Typically, homeowners in your position aren't as experienced in these requests. And so what we have found is helpful is if we start with the zoning administrator to explain the zoning code and explain what the issue is and explain why the village has the rules that it has. And then you have your opportunity to talk about those factors that we have to find if we are to grant the variance. But with that said, if you've done 100 of these and want to go first, you're welcome to, because it's your hearing, it's your application. I'm talking about, I think that's what has usually worked for us. All right. With that said, you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right. Will you state your name for the record?
Jeffrey Retzloff, zoning administrator and village planner for the village of Germantown.
All right.
In September of this year, our inspection services staff of the Community Development Department was in contact with the applicant, Rebecca Kirst, representing the property owner and Allen Builders. And at that time was advised that in order to adjust a front or street yard setback a variance would be required from the village's Board of Zoning Appeals. This pertains to Lot 5 of the Harvest Hills subdivision, located at West 129, North 11638, Hazel Heights. And let's see, Allen Builders, representing Maxwell and Dawn Rivera, subsequently submitted a variance appeal application to the village to reduce the front street yard setback from 112 to 58 feet. That was submitted back on September 29th. I'm going to run through a few slides that will help sort of set the table for the discussion this evening, and feel free as you discuss and deliberate, to ask for me to go back and forth to those if it helps. The property is located in the Harvest Hills subdivision, located in the northeast portion of the village, south of Freistadt Road and west of Wasaki Road. On screen, it shows the subject property highlighted in red way down on the bottom. It's a triangular or a pie-shaped lot at the end of the Hazel Heights cul-de-sac. There's an aerial photograph that shows the same lot highlighted in red at the end of the cul-de-sac. This graphic shows as a portion of the actual final plat document that shows the Rivera parcel highlighted in red, the Nash property to the north, Lot 6, and to the south and west, Lot 4, owned by the Nelsons. And you can also see coming off of the cul-de-sac is the prescribed setback that was adopted as part of the final plat, and that is shown at 112 feet. We've had this discussion before. In fact, I'm going to go back a couple of slides, and you'll see a couple of yellow X's that I've shown in the middle of the photograph here. The end of another cul-de-sac coming out of the Harvest Hill subdivision. Those two properties had also submitted appeals for setback variances for similar reasons. Because of the way the code is written, for pie-shaped lots, the setbacks are usually set further back than the minimum requirement because the street yard or the front yard, one and the same, setback is established at a point where the lot width is 150 feet wide. So on a pie-shaped lot, that setback is going to be further into the lot as the shape of the pie increases in width to a point at 150 feet. As I mentioned, the requested setback variance included in your application is to reduce that setback from 112 feet to 58 feet. This graphic submitted by the applicant does show the positioning of the proposed house on the lot at the 58-foot point situated on the lot, meeting all of the other prescribed setbacks that apply to Lot 5. This graphic shows the topography of Lot 5. And as you can see, across the Rivera property from left to right, at some point, the parcel, it drops off from the front to the back. And then near the back, near the far southern tip, if you will, it sort of flattens out. And those topography lines, those parallel lines, the closer they are, the steeper the grade is. So as you can see, as you move from front to back, it's a fairly steep grade, and then it drops off flat on the back side or the southeast portion of the lot. And that same sort of topography affects the other properties to the north and to the west. This graphic shows the pre-approved mound septic on-site sanitary septic system location highlighted in blue with a building envelope that was proposed as part of the final plat just to the right or to the southeast of that mound location. And as you can see, in this particular graphic, the anticipation was the driveway would run snug tight against the west property line. Parallel to to that building envelope. All right. And this is the proposed mound location provided in the packet that shows the mound highlighted in blue on the other side of the proposed building envelope, assuming that the variance request in some form is granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Couple of photographs that I shot this afternoon from the cul-de-sac looking south across the Rivera lot. To the left is the Nash property, the driveway and the house you can see on the far left side of the photograph. And then on the right side, the Nelson lot with their house that's currently under construction. And the Rivera parcel is that pie-shaped piece in between. This graphic I took from probably about 40 feet into the lot. And as you can see, from the Nash property, the general topography is, once you get past their driveway, it sort of drops off to the Rivera property, and then it starts to slope down to the south of the property. And a similar situation along the west property line or the Nelson property. And this graphic I took from Elm Lane, which is abutting the subdivision on the south side. And I'm looking back toward the Rivera lot. I've tried to highlight as best I can the triangular portion of it in the foreground. And as you can see to the left is the Nelson property on lot 4 and the Nash property and house up on lot 6 to the north of the Rivera property. The variance request is again to reduce that street or front yard setback from 112 to 58 feet, as shown on this particular graphic. And that's all I have at this point.
Can you go back to that previous slide? Because I was about to ask you what the RS3 setbacks would be on a square rectangular lot.
The typical or standard setbacks are just as presented there, a front yard of 45 feet, side of 20 feet, in the rear of 35.
And there must be no setback, side setback for a driveway, right?
There is a 5-foot
5 foot, okay.
setback for a driveway from a property line.
Can you go back to, that shows the other houses? Yeah. So do we know, well, we must know, how far setback from the street are the Nelson and Nash houses?
In your packet, there was information that was provided by the applicant that shows the location. There's a plat of survey. I don't have a slide of it, but there is a page. There's a couple of pages. One that says plat of survey on the top. I don't know if all of you have that or can see that. I'm going to need a little help here because the numbers are a little small. Okay, so on the Nash property, the building is set back 40, did you say 46 feet? 47 feet? Okay. Yeah, I don't know that was the question, but on lot 4, the setback is, it looks like it's approximately 90 feet,
98, okay.
98 feet to the front of the building envelope, or to the corner of the garage, I should say, as shown on that particular plat of survey.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Retzloff right now?
There are slides that show the different options for the system. So, kind of rudimentary measuring it. I think the setback to that building is 100 feet. So that seems like an option where the actual code setback is met.
That I don't know. I can't confirm that.
I guess I'm wondering why that would not be an option. That one, I'm wondering, why that was a proposed location. And it seems to be counterintuitive to where drainage goes, having a sewer go uphill. I mean, is it just because in order to meet the setback, that's the only way that it could have worked, even though it doesn't really make great sense? Or is there another reason why that was a selected location?
The prescribed septic system locations and building envelopes as shown on the plat and in this particular graphic are selected by the developer at the time the plat is prepared. And presumably they work in combination with their soil tester, sanitary system installer to locate the mound in a proper location. And that's what they've identified. Now, clearly, the size and the shape of that mound system or the envelope for that mound system traverses pretty much the full length of the lot in that particular location. On this graphic, it's not, curved in any way. It's straight, but it seemingly extends, a similar potential length of the septic system sized for probably a 4-bedroom, 2 to 3 bath house.
Anybody else? All right, Mr. Vorpagel, you're up. No, come on up. We got to put you on a microphone. And I have to swear you in. So if you'll raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for us. You can give us your business address.
Name's Dave Vorpagel. I work for Victory Companies Incorporated. Our business address is N118 W25704 Bunsen Drive. I believe, pretty sure that's it.
Okay, and where's that? Is that Germantown?
Germantown. Yep.
Germantown, okay. All right. As you know from these, we have, and as your application addressed, in order to grant a variance, we're limited by the village ordinances. And so those issues that you addressed in your application are the things that we're most interested. They're the only things really that we can consider. So go ahead.
Sure. So I guess I wanted to just start by addressing one of the slides showing the septic design. I'm not sure that is 100% accurate or truly indicates what the shape of the design of the mound system is. And I don't quite understand where that came from. I don't know if that is from when a private septic contractor comes to a lot and they do a soil test. I don't know if that was developed by maybe someone from the county, like the soil engineer, or if it was from a different septic contractor, or if perhaps it was from a septic contractor that the developer had used at a certain point. But I don't believe that to be.
Is it this one that you don't think is correct, or was it the other one?
No, this one.
This one, okay.
This one, because even Jeff, you had commented that it was, perfectly parallel lines, not even consistent with the contours. And there was another from Jerry Hafler, another drawing in the packet that shows the configuration of the house that is actually shown to be within the building setbacks, and then more of like a curved. I don't know if everyone has that.
Could I just point out that both graphics were provided by the applicant?
I understand. Yeah, and I can't quite explain, where it came from. It looks like because it shows the boring locations, B1, 2, and 3. I suspect that it may have been from the developer's septic contractor or another contractor. But just being familiar with our septic contractor's drawings that we typically use, and his obviously saying Jerry Hafler excavating on it, I know that that's not ours.
Well, is your point just for precision so that we know that this may not be exactly accurate? Because it doesn't seem to have any bearing on the question of the variance.
Yeah, kind of. But I think that the purpose and a lot of the intent behind the variances revolves around the septic location and because of that, the position of the house on the property that we're trying to put it on.
Yeah, the buttons are hard to press. They're not responsive.
Why don't you just come up?
Yeah. All right, so let me see if I understand. So, but the other drawing showing the location of the septic, if the house meets the code setback requirement, that is, we don't grant the variance, is that one accurate?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so, all right, so if we do grant the variance, the septic mound may not be exactly where that drawing shows, but it
It's not exactly
doesn't
that
make a
drawing.
big difference
Right, yeah.
to whether or not the variance is appropriate.
Yeah, and my understanding of it is whether it be Jerry Hafler Excavating or Todd Kahns or whoever it might be, they might all in-house do their different drawings just as part of their business practice.
Okay, all right, yep. Well, no, then I appreciate that clarification now that I understand it.
I guess the thinking behind us also needing to do the variance for this construction of this home is, while you could see in that previous slide that, you know, the septic configuration and a location of I think it said a proposed 4-bedroom house is quite generic, in fact, and it doesn't meet, you know, the size of the house plan that the Riveras have would like to construct with our company. You know, so this doesn't quite truly illustrate, you know, what we need to do as far as placement of the house. Also, with regard to the severe slope and grade on the lot, we also need to have our house be positioned far enough away from the septic system that we can adequately grade from the back of the house and manage water around the mound system and have the two components work together on the property. This all is leading to having the house be pushed forward to a point where the top of the lot, and I apologize for not having grading plan information submitted along with this. I didn't realize that wasn't on our survey. We just received that today.
It's in our packet. Yeah. I got it here.
Can I give this to everyone here so they can review this? Does it need to be like submitted in any certain way?
Was that part, it wasn't part of the application?
It wasn't on the application, no. But after we had seen some of the comments or the letters from the neighbors, asking about, well, you know, was there concern over water management, or it would be helpful to see grading, information. We then commenced that and did a grading plan so we could show, you know, what we were intending to do.
Okay, yeah, you can,
So,
okay, if you
I've
would,
got
that
a
would be
few
great.
Copies and maybe one here and some for the, I'll run up.
Did that mistake.
While he's doing that, can I look at the document to the left of you? Is that the conclusions of
Yeah.
facts? Did I give you the right? Conclusions, findings of fact. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I put that on the table.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good. I have this one. It's fine.
Thank you.
So one of the challenges, as the
Let
bill.
me, let me do this first. That what you've given us is a document labeled Exhibit prepared for Allen Builders LLC by C3E Geomatics. And why don't you, before you get into your discussion, just tell us what this is, since it's not part of our packet, and we just need to make it for our record so that we understand what
Absolutely.
it is.
So C3E is the survey contractor who we regularly use for the setup of all of our lots. And what I took some time to prepare for you all here is when we as a builder approach lot development for our customers, we have the challenge of working with a site grading plan or a site survey generated by our survey contractor, and then also a site plan showing private on-site wastewater treatment systems developed by the septic contractor. All I've simply done with this is just traced onto this exhibit the scaled version of the septic contractor's mound design, just to illustrate the proximity of the mound to the proposed house location. And then we can also see the relationship between the existing topography and proposed grade lines as they relate to our proposed house, which is set up basically as a partial exposure basement. It's got a 5 foot exposure in the back. We're trying to work with those existing grades at a very challenging rate because this lot does slope so severely in order to work with a partial exposure on the back. So, being that the size and shape of this mound system, now that we have it all on paper, when we were in the field and setting this up with our survey contractor, it was staked with some wooden lath, and we were able to, position ourselves on the property and then make study and adjustment to the grades and the position of the house while we were out there in the field. So that's what we're trying to depict with this drawing. So with all that, if you look at the grade lines and how, I would say I'd back up and say, alternatively, if the mound were be on the front of the lot and we're going to put the home location toward the back of the lot in the more flat area as depicted by the developer, it's not favorable for construction. So we, just at first glance, we'd like to go in another direction with it. And then I mentioned before that with the location of the mound is basically flip-flopping where we need to put the house with this. And also with working with the existing grades, we need to be able to have the front of the house meet within reason what the yard grade is. The existing yard grade is on the front of the property. If you could see a 922 faint dashed line as the existing yard grade in the front, what we've done is we've essentially set the house very close to that, just a little bit higher to promote positive drainage around the house. And then needing to draw it into that hillside as forward as much as possible in order to essentially avoid it from floating in midair if we were to bring it back. What's not completely shown on here is the as-built or the actual grade lines that will go around a mound system, as most lot developments, they typically aren't shown by a survey contractor, or at least what I've seen in my experience. Septic contractors will typically take, leftover topsoil or leftover spoil from the excavation and place that in front of their mound system in order to direct water flow around the mound system. And it's just not part of what the survey contractor usually shows on his grading plan. But wanted to mention that because that's certainly something that would come into play with the setup of this property, along with what we see as common practice on other homes in the subdivision, the Nashes, for example. And I would suspect that, Mike, I didn't catch your last name. Yeah, Nelson's, sorry. I would suspect that they would follow suit as well. Furthermore, I guess I probably don't need to take the time to read verbatim, the comments in our application. But other reasons why we feel that the variance should be approved is that our intent is not to, place a house or a building that's in front of or in an unsightly position when compared to any other of the properties in the subdivision. We felt that the position of the house was more or less in line with neighboring properties to the north and even to the north of that, and didn't really want to be in front of, but just more or less in a row. And I understand that as the process of establishing the building setbacks for each individual lot was derived from taking a 150-foot width off of the side yard lines, that is actually what sets up the the building setbacks as they vary in lot shape, different from the common setback. So lot 7, for example, he's really far back, 118 feet if I recall, and we actually took our master grading plan and took a scale ruler and checked it 3 inches back, 150 feet. Yeah, that's how they're all coming up with that. So.
Could I clarify?
Sure.
If I'm hearing you correctly, there are advantages to moving the home forward on the property because the grade is less extreme at that location than it is further back in the lot. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah.
Is there any detriment to the home to have the mound system located at a higher elevation? So if I'm understanding what was originally proposed is that the mound system would be in front of the house,
Mhm.
but that would put it at a higher elevation than the house itself. It may be
Correct.
several feet, but is there any detriment to the home to having a mound system at a higher elevation in relation to the home?
Detriment, I wouldn't say is probably the most accurate term. More expensive certainly is. So by way of mechanical pumping, you can certainly put a septic system at a higher elevation than a residence or a home or a building. In this case, and another piece that wasn't really discussed as I was sort of just having some conversation with a septic contractor in particular, is that he believes that the original mound location on this property was compromised, that it was disturbed at some point by no proven violator or no evidence really other than just observation of the soil appeared to be disturbed and ultimately wouldn't be usable for a mound location, which could happen by I don't know, trespasser or possibly construction activity happening, a roof truss gets dropped on the neighboring site and disturbs that soil. It's speculative, so.
Mr. Retzloff talked about the driveway hugging the lot line if the mound was located there. Do you agree that that is at least possible, that you've got enough room to put a driveway 5 feet from the lot line that would still get to the house?
Sure. So I think that it's feasible. I mean, obviously you can sort of see that it fits on paper. In a real world practical aspect of this, what you see here with a proposed foundation, finished floor elevation, and we'll just call that roughly the top of foundation elevation of roughly 914. The existing grade at where the mound cells would be located, I believe I see 920 right there. Then you also have the mound itself, which is about 4 to 5 feet tall once it's constructed. Really from the top of the foundation wall, let's just say that that's at 915, the Riveras would essentially look out their front door into a hill and then have another 5, they would have 10 feet of hillside in front of their house. And all of that water would have to come down off of the top of the mound toward the house. We would then, of course, have to, come back and apply for a variance to raise the foundation elevation at that point, to create some sort of reasonable grading plan, water management plan to be able to direct water around the house. It really is not a practical approach to positioning a house. It would never be our recommendation that you position it in that way. Not to mention the slope of the driveway coming down the hill and then needing to turn into a garage at that elevation would be tremendously difficult to navigate.
In this scenario, are you having to pump the waste uphill into the mound system? Or is it still being fed by gravity?
In our proposed scenario,
Scenario here,
in this scenario here,
yes.
this scenario certainly would require it to be pumped uphill.
Unless there's backup power or an event of power outage, they don't have a usable waste system.
Yeah, I mean, to that, this comment's going to be not necessarily in my favor, but to that, I mean, there's many houses that are reliant on mechanical sanitary crocks to pump waste. So not all private sanitary systems are gravity fed. It's a blessing when you can get one to work, but it does happen. In this case, I could only speculate that, holding tanks on a property, on a configuration like this might go off to the northeastern area. They would be pumped from the house, waste would be pumped from the house to the holding tanks and then from the holding tanks up to the mound system by way of a force main system is what it's commonly referred to as. So outside of that, I mean, we did want to, address some of the neighboring concerns of, yeah, we're not trying to be in front of everyone. We just want to give the Riveras, good enough opportunity to construct a home on this lot in a reasonable and practical manner that what we felt was consistent with what the surrounding neighbors were like. And then also wanted to, by way of some of the grading plan documents that we've submitted, just show that, their concerns over water possibly being, directed unduly onto their properties should not be of concern or illustrate, the exact position or elevation of our house for, so they could see what we wanted to do.
In the packet, there's a drawing that shows, I think it was from, looks like Jerry Heffler Excavating, that shows the mound in a configuration similar to the exhibit that you gave us, but shows the house within what appears to be the house envelope, or what I think is a yellow box of the house envelope.
Right.
Which makes it also appear that the house is 100, 110 or so feet from setback. Is that configuration possible? It's not this one. It's a different.
Right. It wasn't in one of the slides. That was the drawing that I was trying to refer to earlier in the conversation. I think the intent of that drawing was not to show that it was possible, but more so to show the impossibility of that. What this drawing is just simply a 2D overhead view, just to view the generic shape and configuration of this. What's certainly not understood is the grading that needs to take place around those two components, the mound and the home, and the relationship between the two. So, and that's just really not accounted for on this drawing, nor are there really accurate dimensions shown. I sort of tried to come up with a generic scale as far as my own questions, wanting to know whether, this drawing was accurate in any way. And I sort of came up with a scaled dimension of 169 feet from the front building setback to the front of where that mound is. But at that point, I realized it was futile and I should just have the surveyor do my traced version of the location.
Is there a code or a standard that dictates a horizontal or a vertical separation from a building to the mound system? Because obviously this drawing shows, the setbacks work, but does the grading not work? Does
Yeah,
it
can you
have the
go-
minimum separation? Is there a code or standard that says what the horizontal or vertical separation has to be?
Sure. So I would say that the code or in terms of grade, that we wouldn't want to exceed a certain slope. And many municipalities or counties would say that they don't want you to exceed a 30% slope or 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 slope. There's that type of consideration as far as code. As far as like the workings on the job site is a strong consideration. You know, I mean, you have to consider the over excavation of the foundation hole, and whether or not that impacts the septic area. So trying to put the edge of a mound system within, say, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 feet of an excavated hole, likely wouldn't work without great expensive shoring or something like that, just because of the over dig of the hole that's necessary to do that. So, it could never be shown or portrayed, what actually happens as far as like the on-site earthwork on a job site. And then also navigating around the site as far as, carpenters, all-terrain forklifts and things like that. To have them out in such close proximity is, in layman's terms, asking for trouble. That's just, the likelihood of it getting damaged is much higher.
Anybody else have any more questions right now for Mr. Borpigel?
So looking at your grading plan, why couldn't the mount system go down in the corner more?
Sure. So, the position of a mound is dictated by soil tests that are performed on any given site. Okay, and there was standing water observed in the lower, more flat area of the property that was deemed unsuitable for a mound construction location by the contractor. And then when a septic contractor performs a soil test and then, has the state inspector out, the soil engineer out to, to certify the test, I mean, they don't do it they try to pick an area that they have a good, idea that's going to work. So obviously a ponded area is not going to work. So the position of it is, as you can see, kind of at a higher elevation, sort of up the hillside away from those low-lying areas.
Anything else?
Just, is there a mound system on the Nelson property? I noticed that property is the same, just mirrored almost in terms of shape. Not necessarily grading across it.
Yeah, in the packet, the Nelson's survey done by Continental, excuse me, shows their proposed dwelling and then also their mound system, which is also different from the developer's proposed septic location. I guess I just make that comment just to establish that the mound locations frequently change based off of the individual site plans and what customers want to do with their properties. So,
I mean, on that one, it looks like the mound is 15 feet off the corner of their house. Is that where it got constructed? The actual plan?
I believe so. I couldn't say for certain. Just going back in the commentary that I had made on my own experience with our survey contractor showed, even on my sketch that I just shared with all of you, he shows a proposed septic area. It's not necessarily the as-built. They may vary in location some. So I couldn't say for sure. You said.
Anything else? No? All right, and we'll give everybody another chance. All right, anything else you want to tell us right now?
I don't think so.
All right. At this point, we can have any public comments. So if Mr. and Mrs. Nash, if there's, so typically what we do is we ask, does anyone want to speak in favor of the variance? And then I ask if anybody wants to speak opposed to the variance. Then I ask, is there anybody who wants to be heard, but neither for or against? And so do either of you want to be heard? Do you want to tell us anything? All right, come on up. If you'd both raise your right hands. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Okay, let's do this. So we got to speak one at a time. And whoever is going to start, tell us your name and address for our record, please.
Doug Nash, W129 and 1164 Hazel Heights, Germantown, Wisconsin, 53022.
What would you like to tell us?
I just want to start up on the property location. There was some commentary made about it being in line, but if you look at the cul-de-sac, actually the houses are all staggered in different setbacks. So they're maybe technically in line, but they're set back specifically for reasons for aesthetics and for the spacing. So as you look out windows around the house and the way that they're shaped, you can't necessarily see the other house. So that was one of intentional design that was approved in the original plat. So that's part of, and as we mentioned, the lots, the distance between the street and the houses was done intentionally.
And your house is the one that's, if that was oriented north-south, that you're north of it. Okay, yep.
So our concern it's just about that by adjusting the placement of the house, that has impacts to that intentional design and character of the neighborhood and the subdivision. In the original notice, and when we purchased our lot and we placed our house, we understood that where the house would be placed would be a distance from where our house is. So that was our original intention.
And your house is back 45 feet?
Yeah. 47.
47. And then this one, the request is to make it 58, and that's from the front corner of the garage. And so I assume your 48 feet or 47 feet is from the front corner. It's the closest spot to the street. And so there's, would be talking about less than 10 feet further back than you. All right, I get it.
Yes, and then in other parts of the subdivision, there's another cul-de-sac. In that cul-de-sac, there are some houses that have some of the compact septic systems in the front or on the side facing that face with the driveways to allow room.
My name Amy Nash, W129 and 11664 Hazel Heights. So to top on top what my husband said, the placement of their house with the 58 feet being on the pie shape, they're going to be really close to our house. They're basically going to be right behind our basketball hoop, which is on the edge of the driveway. So again, just compromising the residential rural which is the intended characteristics of the neighborhood as listed on the village website, and how we, when we purchased the lot and how we placed our house, don't intend to necessarily be right on top of each other. I think that, goes against the feel of the neighborhood. Our neighbor on the other side has a very long setback. And I don't think there's any reason that they can't keep their house at 112-foot setback and adjust the mound system or do something different in the compact side by side that doesn't take up as much room and still would allow them to put it down in that bottom corner and still meet the setback requirements. I know those are more expensive, but they're much smaller, and it would allow them to keep the placement in this corner here and have their lot be, or their house be back, the setback of what is intended to the neighborhood.
Okay.
Like I said, there are other houses that have their mound system in the front. They have a hill right in front of their house too. It's part of the you assume the risk of when you buy a lot on where things are set. that- That's where they're set to be placed, and that's, part of when you buy something that you assume the risk of.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Mr. or Mrs. Nash? No? Okay. Anything else you want to add? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak in favor, against, or on this issue? Come on up. And if you would raise your right hand, you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, can you state your name and address for our record, please?
My name is Michael Nelson. The address that we're building at is W129-11615 Hazel Heights.
Okay. And you're the house that is south of the red triangle? If that's oriented north and south, yeah, right.
The question on the septic tank
Mhm.
and the mound system is it was built as proposed on the plat. So it is within 15 or 20 feet off the house. It's just not in on that picture. My comments are really that, looking at this grade, this does answer my questions about having a swale to make sure water management happens correctly. But there's also room to move both the house and the mound system back and get what they want, but go more, instead of a 58-foot variance or setback, go more into the 80 to 90-foot setback to have some sort of compromise. So you're pushing the house further back. If you look at the drawing, the exhibit that was shown tonight, the mound system is actually brought forward from where it was originally drawn on here. So there is room to push both the house and the mound system back while still giving them some ability to move forward and keep the mound system in the back, but have it further back. So sort of a potential compromise.
Okay. Yeah. Any questions for Mr. Nelson?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vorpagel, if you could come back for a minute. If you would, address those two issues, the one raised by the Nashes about these compact septic systems, and then secondly, Mr. Nelson's suggestion that there is room to push that mound further back so that you don't need a variance that you don't need to set the house quite so close to the street.
Sure, sure. So, thanks for mentioning the septic systems. There are different types of septic systems that are currently being constructed that are different from what I would term as more of a conventional type mound system. These systems, as Amy had mentioned, yeah, they are more expensive. They can require aeration pumps, different types of tanks. I'm not an expert septic contractor, so I don't know all the pros, cons, inner workings of it. But at a high level, these extra components are more costly. And there's also, I believe, different types of aggregate that can be used in the mound system itself. Might be something on the order of like foam peanuts or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. At the end of the day, it's not something that our trusted septic contractor, who we work with on 95% of all of our homes, which we currently do in about 80 in the Milwaukee market right now. It's not something that we ever recommend. Just because we trust what's tried and true and has worked for many, many years, and are hesitant to go to newer technology that just hasn't been around long enough, to our knowledge, that's been proven. So don't dispute that they do exist. But as far as what we would like to recommend, along with dozens of other things that we'd like to recommend with the construction of our homes, it's just not what our company is in favor of proposing. So.
What is explain to me, if you know.
Yeah.
the difference between the two and how let's assume cost were no object.
Sure.
And explain to me whether or not, and I appreciate that the technology is new. You're not sure that that it'll last. You don't like it. I get all of that. But based on what you know about the product, explain to me whether how it would differ from, or whether it would meet the needs of, or allow you to put in that new untested septic that you don't like.
Yeah.
And meet the setback. Just explain to me if it would
Yeah.
work.
So maybe if we could flip back to the slide that simply showed the two septic cells on the one drawing that we claim to not know where it came from. Yeah, that guy. So this one might, and you can even see at the edge of the sheet where it says like 2 3-foot by 100-foot cells with 6 feet of space in between. So my understanding of these compact systems is that they pre-treat the material that's coming into the mound system. Therefore, the cells don't need to be constructed in as large of a structure. So the cells might be reduced to 60 feet long each or something like that. So you're able to get a smaller system on a site to still work and still function. But it's the longevity of it and the quality behind it that, it's just yet to be proven. So
Is it still built up the same, elevation, the same 5 feet or whatever
similar, I believe similar. Yeah. I think if it's a mound, it's a mound. I think it's a similar fashion. I think it just doesn't require as much aggregate, as much sand to be brought in, as much lineal footage of piping to create the on-site filter, if you will. So.
Okay.
Also, another comment on the Nash's perception of the building setbacks and they just made it sound like it was staggered for an intentional purpose of, the visual aspect of the subdivision. And just to clarify, I kind of touched base on this a little bit before. I don't know if I read this in information that was in this packet or had just spoken with someone that the setback distance were set by a lot, like on a pie-shaped lot that is not these setback distances, like this one, for example, is taken from a 150 width. As soon as it's reached here. So if you have a scale version of this, you take a scale, you can measure across here, measure 3 inches at a scale, 150 feet. As soon as you draw your scale back, it's a lot setback. Check that. That's why this lot in particular, if you cross here, sure enough, it's at 100. This property is greater than 150. So it doesn't come into play. And it's this one. That's how that was set. That's what I was told the name of the verify too. So.
Well, that's what Mr. Retzloff said at the beginning too.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. All right.
That exhibit dictates where the house can be per code, per setback. Is there any further restrictions dictated by the homeowners association that would further define staggering behind or beyond what the code setback would say?
I couldn't say.
What about Mr. Nelson's suggestion about, and the exhibit that you gave us does seem to suggest that where you've drawn the mound, you could push it to the what I assume is the east, and then move the house back so that you don't need to be 58 feet from the.
Sure.
You might be able to get 60, 70.
Yeah, and the only thing that I can say with regard to that is that the test area that was selected or done out there was done at the discretion of the septic contractor and the soil test engineer at the time. I'm certain that if there was any way that they could have brought it downhill at a lower elevation to move it toward that back lot line, that they would have done so. But there is a low-lying, wet area. It's not necessarily shown or designated as any kind of like designated wetland on a survey or anything like that, but there is ground that appeared to be saturated and not suitable for construction of the mound back toward the other side of the lot. Certainly, if we could move it down more, we absolutely would. But the soil just wasn't
On
going
your,
to test.
on your original exhibit, the original oval that says proposed septic area is south and east of where you drew it in on your
Sure,
pencil.
sure.
So who would have drawn that oval that says proposed septic area?
Yeah, I think that our septic contractor, or sorry, our survey contractor put that on there. And it's I can't quite explain why, it's not 100% where the actual test location is, other than he's not the one who performs the soil test and actually takes those measurements. He only observes what's in the field. And at this level of at a pre-contract status, our septic contractor was maybe out to the site to just put some stakes in the ground in more of a generic fashion, and that it may not have been the exact location or configuration or even size of the mound. So whether or not our septic contractor took measurements or shots of an existing stake or group of stakes that's out there, or whether it was just something that was generically sketched on maybe a preliminary version of the survey, perhaps even by myself, hey, this is roughly where the septic area is going to go. That just kind of explains the discrepancy between the two drawings. As I said before, the marrying of the two survey and site grading plan and septic plan is, we have it on every job, and usually it's not as critical with the precise location of it on a lot that's far less complex.
Anything else for Mr. Warpagel? Anybody have anything else for Mr. Retzloff? Mr. and Mrs. Rivera, if either of you have anything you want to tell us, you're welcome to. I understand. I know Mr. Vorpable is your agent and has done a fine job presenting your application. But with that said, it's your lot, it's your life. You're welcome to tell us anything that you would like to tell us, if there is anything else you would like to tell us. Oh, okay. Fair enough. I just didn't want you ever to think that you didn't, that we didn't give you a chance to tell us something that you wanted to tell us. All right. Anything else? All right, Mr. Vorpagel, I'm about to close the hearing. So if there is anything else that you want to tell us, now is the time.
Yeah, and I guess, we did petition for a variance, wanting to, I wouldn't say shoot for the moon and see what falls is the best way of putting it into words. But at the end of the day, we don't necessarily want to walk away and not see some form of compromise if necessary, from the neighbors. Like I said before, we're not trying to be too forward to say that this it has to be this way. Although we certainly would like the opportunity to build on a lot in this nice neighborhood, just as everybody else did, and this lot certainly poses its own unique challenges that we're asking for the neighbors' cooperation and the village's cooperation in allowing us to do what we'd like.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Retzloff, I assume you don't have anything else before I close the hearing?
Clarify.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. And then I'll give you another chance because you always get to go last.
Couple of things. The setback locations and the building envelopes. When the developer proposes a lot configuration along with their road layout and such, they have to meet certain requirements for the zoning district that applies, in this case, the RS3 district, minimum 1 acre parcel size. And most of the lots in this subdivision are slightly more than 1 acre. So when it comes to pie-shaped lots, from my experience, it gets a little complicated, it gets a little tight. And what you see, for example, on here, the developer, their responsibility to the village and to the state, for that matter, is to prove that each lot can support an on-site septic system. Doesn't matter where, just has to be somewhere on the lot. And in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily the most ideal location, but it is a location that either by whatever reason, maybe the generalized soil map shows that particular location as being the most suitable soil, so they'll test there. They're not going to waste their time poking a bunch of holes on a lot. They go right to where they need to go. They test it, they prove it can support a system, and they go on. In a lot of cases, it's with the idea that the ultimate location of the septic system, the size, the shape, the location will be determined by the builder and the owner at the time they've chosen their house design, their configuration. Is it a ranch? Is it 2-story? Is it like this where the garage has sort of a 45-degree angle outward extension? All those things play into the design of the lot, the ultimate configuration of where that septic system goes. In the case of the final plat, the building envelopes that are shown based on the setbacks, the house can go anywhere in that box unless the developer wants the homes to meet a certain type of, if they want it to be a build-to line, which is a term used to describe or to require the home to be built right at this point. No further back, but we build it right to this line. That doesn't apply in this case. In this case, in this subdivision, wherever the box is, the house can go anywhere in there. If it happens to be that once all the homes are built, that there's some sort of staggered pattern, that's coincidental. The only purposeful arrangement might be a result of exactly what we have here, and that is pie-shaped lots get introduced, the widths come into play, and the minimum setback based on the village's definition puts it further back into the lot. And so that's what has to be dealt with. The layout of the homes that give it an appearance of being sort of staggered or offset, again, is in this case coincidental. And that's really all that I have.
Thank you. Mr. Vorpagel, did that prompt you to want to add anything else? Okay. Then I will declare the hearing closed and we will begin our deliberations as we always do. We begin with our first consideration, whether or not the variance will or will not be contrary to the public interest, or will not be in accord with the spirit of the zoning code. That's public interest, remember. Anyone have any thoughts? I have a thought. It's that that in RS3 that houses have to be 45 feet back from the road. The fact that it is a pie-shaped lot, I understand what the zoning code says, which, you measure where it's 150 feet wide, but that doesn't change the fact that this requested variance would be further back than if it were a square or rectangular shaped lot. So the real intent of the zoning code is to make sure that your houses are no more than 45 feet, closer than 45 feet to the road, and this would be less than 40, or this would be more than 45 feet from the road. So I think it is consistent with the spirit of the zoning code.
So I'd agree with that.
It makes me wonder a little bit about the requirement that at the point where it reaches 150 feet, if that has anything to do with the width, just to try and avoid houses from being so close together that, you know, obviously up front where it's less than 150 feet at 50 feet from the road, you know, if you had all of them there, your houses would be really jammed together.
But you still have your side setbacks. Right?
Still
And
50
so,
feet.
right, so whatever the code says is the side setback, as long as, you know, you can't be so close to the front of a wedge-shaped lot that you don't meet the side setbacks, right? I think the 150, I don't know, but I mean, we could have asked Mr. Etzloff, but I think the 150 feet is just it's an arbitrary number that they picked, 150. Let's, you know. They could have said 100. They could have said, I mean, I think they're just arbitrary. But that's just my thought. That's just my thoughts. I'm not trying to talk anybody into it.
I think on the second, guess, question of number one, whether the variance will or will not be in accordance with the spirit of the zoning code. I think it would be, a variance would be within the spirit of the code. Every lot, especially these pie-shaped ones, have certain challenges. And I think that, that the property owners are trying to make use of the different options that they have to make their desires come true. And staying as close to the code as possible. It also seems that, they do have their neighbors' interests in mind in trying to do this. I think it does fit within the spirit of the code.
I think this question has come up before when there's been a request for a setback variances, and like in this case, you're asking for 58 feet instead of 112. So we had determined that 70 works or 90 works or 100 feet works. We have the ability to say, well, we grant the variance at a reduced setback than what the applicant is requesting, or is it a yes or no only that, well, you asked for 58 and we're saying it could be 100, so we're saying no. Trying to remember what the actual rule is and how we have to rule on.
No, we can, or I'll tell you. We can put conditions on the variance. We can grant something different than,
So it's not an all or nothing.
it's not an all or nothing. They don't have to, they don't have to live with it. But, you know, they might say, well, we can't live with that, so we'll. But, yeah, we can put conditions.
Could I just ask for the screen that shows the various properties in, yes, that one. Thank you.
All right, are we good to move on to the next one? All right. Our next question is whether there are or are not exceptional, extraordinary, unusual conditions or circumstances that apply specifically to this lot or parcel use, structure, or intended use that do not apply generally to other property or uses in the same district.
This one seems to raise the question that we ask, is the only way to build a house to violate the zoning on building a septic system? Testimony I heard is that there's flexibility from what the request was. And in fact, what I heard was that they could build a house with a different septic system that wouldn't meet the setbacks. May not be the ideal request, but there's technology out there, and you know, I heard the word unproven, but I heard that other houses have been built with that technology. So I would say that's beyond improvement. It's beyond development. It's in place. It's being used.
Well, let me just make sure I understand what you're saying, because number 3 is whether it's necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property right. That sounds more like you're getting to whether they really need the variance.
I was thinking exceptional, extraordinary, unusual conditions.
that apply to this parcel. I was thinking just that it's pie-shaped and sloped. So that's what, to me, makes it unusual, that doesn't apply to other people. Because if it wasn't pie-shaped, they could put the house 45 feet from the road. So I was thinking that was the unusual thing.
Is it really unusual when the neighbors are pie shaped?
No, right, yeah, exactly.
It's not like they don't
That's
make
right.
pie-shaped
Right, at what point does something become not unusual? It doesn't become usual, yeah.
There's two that are a street over that we've talked about
Right.
last year.
Yeah, well, it says that do not apply generally to other property or uses. It generally doesn't. I don't know, that would be my view. That it,
And then in the same district, are there other properties in the same district that have a similar situation? I guess the answer is probably yes.
probably yes,
Pretty cul-de-sac.
but that do not apply generally. And so it doesn't apply generally to anybody who's got a non-pie shaped lot, right? So the general thing is that it's not, you're not pie shaped generally, right? And then you can do 45 feet. I'm not sure it's that's, exceptional, extraordinary, or unusual, but I think that's to me, that's the question, whether pie-shaped and sloped in the back, make a difference to us. If it wasn't pie-shaped and they wanted to move it 20 feet, let's say it was rectangular and they said, oh, I want a variance because I want to put it 20 feet from the road, we would say no. Because there would be nothing unusual about it. They have to have some reason that they want it or need it.
Say if this area back here was a wetland or it was a drainage area or it was a pond that had to serve theirs or other parcels, then that would be something even more extraordinary.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be the case here.
But I think there was testimony that it was not suitable for mound system back in that corner, however, so it is.
So they couldn't do the mound system, but they could maybe build the house in a different way and move the mound system, maybe just rotate it or do, like they said before, like do something with a smaller technology.
I think the lot is marginally, exceptional.
We might be getting ahead of ourselves here, I think, but if we look at the nature of the lot itself and the elevation changes, I think it does indicate that there are some exceptional and extraordinary and unusual circumstances here that,
Because of the grade of the lot.
and the pie shapedness of it, yes.
That's the way I see it. And then we get to number 3, and it becomes more your issue here and both of your issues. I think that's the way I see it. That number 3 then is whether it's necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same district. Is this variance necessary? And I think that's more your point.
Yeah.
The quote from the testimony was, doesn't have to be this way.
So, I mean, the grading is an unusual condition. Not that other lots don't have grading like that, but the grading itself isn't really what driving the placement of the septic system.
Right. I got to ask though, or see what you guys think of this notion that if you put the septic system in front, where it can go, and the driveway can run along the side, but this idea that the house sits down, whatever it is, 5 or so feet, and then you got the mound built up 5 feet on top of that. I mean, when he said that, they're going to be looking out into a hill, that to me kind of is the enjoyment of a substantial, having to look out on it, right?
But like Mr. Retzloff said, the setback is over here. If this thing slid back, you're opening up a bunch more room over here. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in front.
You're right.
On the side too.
Yeah, right.
Depending on the type of system you use, like if you're using a smaller system that has a smaller footprint, you have more flexibility.
Kind of wish we knew more about, other options, both in terms of placement, from the septic contractor, or other, what other people think about these more compact systems.
Like you said, that might be more of the next question.
Oh, I thought we had moved on.
Yeah, are we moving on to the?
I thought we were on the next one. Sorry.
It really goes back.
Yeah, so is it necessary for,
Able to build it?
what's that?
Are they not able to build a house without violating the setback?
Right. Well, yeah, or I don't know if it's, I don't, at least to my way of thinking, it's not complete impossibility. So that then, all right, they bought a vacant lot and they can't do anything with it and they lost their money. I don't think that's the issue. It's whether the variance is necessary for preservation and enjoyment of a substantial property right. So it's not that it renders it, that it's impossible without it, but I think that they lose out on a substantial property right. So I guess that's pretty close to impossible, but I also think this wall in front of you, the hill in front of you is, that makes a difference to me. I don't,
The one.
and that's not gonna look good for the neighbors either. See, that's the other thing that's not gonna look good. You know, your house sitting down at the bottom of a, you know, on the slope, and then you got this big thing in front of you. I appreciate the neighbors don't like the idea of the house being close, but it also, I don't know that the other thing is gonna look very good either. But anyway, so yeah, preservation and enjoyment. So are there other options that are available? I guess that's the question.
I think that's what it comes down to for me. I'm not sure that I feel comfortable enough to say, to conclude in my own mind that all of the possible options have been looked at. Including the possibility of a mini, I think it was referred to as a mini mound system. I know it has its own drawbacks, cost being one of them. And I'm not quite clear in my own mind if the mound system is set to the back of the residence of the home. There was no one map or plat map that I looked at that I drew the conclusion that this is what it would look like, and that's the only way that it can look.
Yeah.
So for number 3, I'm drawing the conclusion that the variance, because I lack all of that information, the variance is not necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other properties in the same district, because there might be some other options out there that might be feasible.
I agree. I think necessary being key there. You know, I get it, like that, the right of not having to stare out at a hill, but it doesn't sound like, we don't know that that's the only option.
Right.
I agree with you on that.
Same.
All right, let's go on to number 4. The variance will or will not create substantial detriment to adjacent property. Or will or will not be contrary to public safety or public interest. I don't think it's, I think we can, I don't think it's contrary to public safety. Doesn't have anything to do with that, or public interest. I don't think any, but the question is whether or not it creates a substantial detriment to the adjacent property. And we've heard from, well, at least the Nash's don't like the idea of it, whether that's a substantial detriment. And Mr. Retzloff's point is that how houses lay out in those building envelopes are, it's fortuitous. And so,
I'd say if it was creating a drainage issue or some other issue, then that would be a substantial detriment. The setback, visually, I don't.
it may not be their preferred, it may not be preferred, but whether that's a substantial detriment to them or and to their property, I don't know about that. And the last one is whether a literal enforcement of terms of zoning code would or would not result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship. And that's another one, I guess we probably just don't feel like we fully know.
It would not.
Because we don't really know, right? If it turned out well, would you say that regard, so let's say that the only possible location, there are only 2 possible locations. The in front of the house that would meet the setback, and then the driveway along the side, or where they proposed it on this exhibit that Mr. Vorpagel gave us. If those are the only 2 choices, would you say that a literal enforcement doesn't result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship?
If the only two choices were a mount system like that being in place, I would probably say it would create a hardship. because
Yeah, that's
I
kind of what I'm
don't
thinking.
like the idea of having to pump it up to a system and then if there's a power outage, you got no waste disposal, but there's been testimony that it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. So, right, so that's kind of what I'm thinking too, that we just don't know. We don't quite know.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking if we don't grant the variance, and then they go back and say, oh, we're gonna propose option B or C, and they evaluate that B or C option, and then they say, okay, we've evaluated all these options, and they might be back in front of us again.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
That say,
That-
now
no,
there
but-
is no other way to do it other than this way, but that's not where we're at, I don't think.
Well, I would think that, I see no reason we can't do this, that we could adjourn the hearing. We could deny the variance on the basis that it hasn't been, that we're not sure that it's necessary for substantial, for preservation, and we're not certain that it would result in practical difficulty. Or what we could say is, we'll adjourn the hearing. We need Mr. Warpagel to bring in a septic guy, and we need some more evidence as to whether or not other options are available, because we don't, and advantage to that too is it gives them an opportunity to explore those other options. And
Well, we deny the variance, what would prevent them from evaluating those other options and
coming back,
coming back?
nothing, but it's another $500 they gotta pay.
Well, that's not good, but otherwise you could be back, if we give an opportunity to come back, they might say, well, we've got these other options and.
Well, then they could withdraw the request. They could certainly do that. Or they could, right.
Say, well, we know that we've evaluated these other options and it doesn't work without moving the building within the setback, and then we could evaluate that.
That's kind of what I mean. Yeah, yeah. So, right, so I guess that's really the question for what we want to do. What we want to do is whether, that we don't think that we've got a sufficient record to be able to properly grant the variance, but we're not convinced that the facts are such that that they're not entitled to it. They just haven't made a proper record. So we can either deny it on the basis that it was their burden to convince us, and they didn't, or we can say, why don't you go, we need to know more, and here are the things that we need to know, and if you want to pursue this, you're going to have to go bring us those guys to prove that to us. I guess those are our options. And if they don't, and if we did the latter, and they don't like it, they can always withdraw it, which is no worse than if we deny it, except it gives them, if they do want to pursue it and can give us more evidence, it saves them the $500 filing fee. I don't know. That's at least an option available to us.
I personally like that option. I think, and then requiring that information to come back to us on the 2 or 3 other options that we've heard tonight and why they might work or why they would not work. And then we can make a better determination whether a variance would be appropriate or not.
Hopefully the deliberations would be in the record that if they have another option that, well, it's not great, but it works, we want to do it, then is it really necessary? As opposed to we've evaluated other options and it isn't going to work. That's a different answer then. Like my point being, if the other options are analyzed and an option is reviewed that, yeah, it works and we don't like it, but it works. Knowing that if they come back with that, it works, well, is it really necessary? Then we could be saying it's not necessary.
That's probably what we would say, yeah, but it gives it gives the homeowner a chance to know where we're going, what we're thinking, and then they can kind of work it out with yeah, and maybe it even creates a little neighborhood harmony too, because you don't want to get off on the wrong foot with all your neighbors.
I think this goes to the point that you're making, and this is, I think I'm reading from the code specifically, I believe, which touches on these 5 questions that we ask ourselves with every variance that is brought before us. And with regards to the hardships, it says, hardships not grounds for variance. No variance shall be granted solely on the basis of economic gain or loss. Self-imposed hardships shall not be considered as grounds for the granting of the variance.
Yeah.
So this idea might work, but I don't like it. That's a self-imposed hardship.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. And the fact that if the only issue is, this is why I said to Mr. Vorpagel that if cost was not an option, could you do it? Because if the only reason you don't want to do a smaller system is because it costs more, that's not something we can't base our variance on. Yeah. Right. Well, what do you guys think?
Make a motion to table?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I would think we, yeah, I mean, I think, well, I'll do it. The motion I would, for consideration, the way I would phrase the motion is that, that I would move that, that we defer decision on this variance and set this matter for a further hearing, at which time the applicant will need to present evidence showing that the other potential options, such as a smaller, whether or not the potential, that the variance is necessary in light of other potential locations or other potential systems. Right?
Yes. Is that a motion? Looking for a
Yeah,
second?
no, that was my, yeah. So that'll be my, is that phrased sufficiently that you can?
I have defer decision on this variance and set this matter for a further hearing, at which time the applicant will need to present evidence of other potential options, locations, or systems.
Be necessary.
Yeah, that, yeah, I think that's my motion, because we'll explain to the applicant that we don't think that they have presented sufficient evidence for us to grant the variance tonight. And we want to give them another chance instead of just flat out denying it, which is the only other option that we have available to us based on the evidence that was presented tonight. Yeah, so that's my motion.
I'll second that.
All right, well, since the motion has been made and seconded, we'll vote. Unless anybody has further discussion, or anybody want to make my motion different? All right. If you would call the roll, please.
Edwards,
Nay.
Hanson,
Aye.
Knopf,
Just to clarify, this is a vote on the motion, correct?
Vote on the motion, yep.
Aye.
White,
Aye.
motion carries.
All right, so here you got the gist of it. We take our statutory and code limitations very seriously. I know a lot of municipalities, they probably don't, but we believe that we are limited to the letter of the zoning code and the power that is granted to us under the village ordinances and Wisconsin state law. So as you figured out, we did not think that we had sufficient evidence to establish 2 of the 5 criteria. That is, we didn't think we had sufficient evidence to say that the variance is necessary for preservation or enjoyment of a substantial property right. And we didn't think that we had enough evidence to say that a literal enforcement of the zoning code would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship to the applicant. Because we are unclear whether other locations might actually be viable, and we are unclear whether this other system, that I appreciate that is not your first choice, but whether that is, whether it's such a bad option that the variance is necessary rather than trying that option. And so rather than denying the homeowner's variance outright, we wanted to give you an opportunity to come back with presumably a septic contractor or with more analysis as to whether there are other locations, and to know a little bit more about that other system. And if it turns out that there are no other locations, and it turns out that the other system is not a viable alternative, then we will deliberate again on the request for a variance. Does that make sense? All right. Well, so where I will, I suppose, leave this is that when you're prepared, when you want to schedule that hearing, let Mr. Retzloff or somebody with the village to know, and then we'll publish a new notice indicating that this is a continuation of this hearing. And we do these on the second Wednesday of any month. And yeah, and if you have other options, you know, pushing the house back a little further, but not requesting, you know, the 58 feet, that we'll listen to that as well. And that might, you know, get you off on a better foot with your new neighbors. So, all right, well, that's the best we can do for tonight. Of course. All right, so that concludes this hearing. Our next meeting will be, do we have a next one? A December one at the moment?
It's time,
Okay.
no.
All right. All right. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Anything else from anyone? Well, no, we weren't noticed for anything else, so there's nothing else to talk about. Anybody have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
All right. All in favor of adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. And you can add this. You got your exhibit for the record?
That has one. I can scan that in. Do you want to keep yours?
Well, yeah, actually, we should keep our stuff because we're going to be coming back because we're not over.
Yeah, and Jeff will let me.
Okay. Well. Excuse me.